The notification sound on a smartphone is usually mundane, but for Shannon Hyatt, it was the sound of a deteriorating life. In August 2023, Shannon wasn't just living through a breakup. She was documenting a survival story. Shannon was 29 years old, a woman of sharp intellect with a bachelor's in psychology from Ohio State and a high-stakes career as a fraud investigator. She was trained to see through lies, to find the red flags in financial data, and yet she found herself entangled with a man who would eventually claim to be a god. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. To understand why a woman like Shannon died, you have to look at the 9 days leading up to August 29th. This wasn't a sudden snap. It was a digital and psychological war. Shannon had joined several Facebook groups, including Are We Dating the Same Guy? And Ohio Rave Sisters. Her posts weren't revenge porn or trashing an ex. They were public service announcements. She shared a photo of 26-year-old Chance Donahoe, warning other women in the Columbus music scene that he was a thief. She detailed how he had stolen her medication and her money to fuel a habit that was spiraling out of control. While Shannon was trying to untether herself from the toxicity, Chance was watching. He wasn't just lurking. He was absorbing the reality that his reputation was being dismantled by the woman he claimed to love. For Chance, Shannon was no longer a person. She was a vessel. In his mind, the music festivals where they met, the places where Shannon felt most alive, had become the backdrop for his own delusions of grandeur. He began to obsess over the God frequency, a belief system that convinced him he was superior to the laws of man. On the night of August 28th, the tension reached a boiling point. Chance wasn't at Shannon's house anymore. He had been kicked out 9 days prior and was living with his mother in Powell, Ohio. But his mind was at 1411 Berkeley Road. Around 11 p.m., Chance decided to do what he called a drive-by. He didn't have a weapon yet. He just wanted to see if his suspicions were true. As he cruised past the quiet suburban home, he saw a van. It belonged to Matt, a man Shannon had recently befriended. In that moment, the god felt a very human emotion: jealousy. He watched Matt leave, and instead of approaching the house then, Chance did something that would later prove his absolute premeditation. He drove all the way back to his mother's house, a 40-mile round trip. He wasn't in a blind rage that prevented him from driving safely or navigating traffic. He was on a mission. He arrived at his mother's home, went to the kitchen, and selected a specific knife from the block. He changed his clothes into a tactical, all-black outfit. He was dressing for a murder. As he drove back toward Berkeley Road for the second time that night, the city of Columbus was quiet. Shannon was likely settling in for the night, perhaps feeling a sense of relief that the house was finally hers again. She had blocked Chance on social media. She had warned the world about him. She thought the digital wall she built would protect her. She had no idea that the man who once called her his everything was currently armed with a kitchen knife, speeding toward her front door with a plan to absorb her spirit. Chance parked around the corner, another calculated move to avoid being seen by neighbors or security cameras too early. He walked toward the porch, his shadow stretching under the streetlights. Inside, Shannon heard a sound at the door. It wasn't a knock. It was the sound of a shoulder hitting the wood with enough force to splinter the frame. As the door gave way and Chance stepped into the entryway, Shannon's last words began to form. But they weren't the words of a victim who had given up. They were the beginning of a desperate, final struggle that would leave the house on Berkeley Road forever stained. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. When the door to 1411 Berkeley Road burst open, the silence of the suburban night was shattered. Shannon Hyatt, standing in her own hallway, was suddenly face to face with a version of Chance Donahoe she had never seen before. He wasn't speaking. He wasn't yelling. He was a silent, black-clad figure moving with a terrifying, singular purpose. Chance would later describe this moment to detectives with a chilling lack of emotion. He claimed that as he began the attack, Shannon cried out, "I love you." Whether this was a desperate plea for mercy or a final expression of a broken heart, we will never truly know. What we do know are the physical facts. This was not a quick death. Chance didn't just use the knife. He used his superior size, standing a foot taller and weighing nearly 100 pounds more than Shannon, to overwhelm her. The struggle moved from the entryway. Shannon fought. Evidence of that fight was written on Chance's own body. His hands were covered in deep lacerations where the knife had slipped during the violence, and Shannon had fought back with everything she had. But the god he thought he was didn't feel the pain yet. He stabbed her 37 times. He targeted her chest, her neck, and her back, in a final, clinical act to speed up the process. He slit her throat. What happened next is perhaps more disturbing than the murder itself. Most killers flee the scene immediately, driven by panic or adrenaline. Chance did the opposite. He stayed. For 3 hours, he occupied the house with Shannon's body. He would later tell police that he felt less alone in those hours than he had since the breakup. He believed that by killing her, he had captured her life force, effectively making her a part of him forever. During this 3-hour window, Chance's behavior was a bizarre mix of the mundane and the macabre. He noticed Shannon's cats wandering the house, confused by the blood and the lack of movement from their owner. He went into her toolbox and found a power drill. In a deliberate attempt to delay the discovery of the body, he screwed the front door shut from the inside. He wanted to ensure that no one, not neighbors, not police, not family, could simply walk in and interrupt his communion with the spirit he believed he had stolen. He also took the time to disable her Wi-Fi and security cameras, though he was too late to stop the doorbell camera from capturing his initial approach. At 2:11 a.m., a time when most of the world is dreaming, Chance walked out onto the porch to smoke a cigarette. CCTV footage from a neighbor shows him standing there, calm and rhythmic, the glowing cherry of the cigarette the only light in the dark. He wasn't pacing. He wasn't crying. He was enjoying the freedom he knew was about to end. He eventually moved his car from around the corner into her driveway. He went back inside and put on gloves. He didn't do this to hide his fingerprints. He knew his DNA was everywhere. He did it because he didn't want Shannon's blood dripping on his steering wheel. He was protecting his vessel, even as he sat in the middle of a crime scene that looked like a horror movie. As the sun began to hint at the horizon, Chance finally left. He drove back to his mother's house in Powell. But he didn't go there to hide. He went there to confess, but not out of remorse. He went there because he wanted his mother to see what he had become. He woke her up at 5 a.m., standing in her bedroom, likely still smelling of the cigarettes and the copper tang of blood, and told her that he had done it. He had killed the woman who had trashed them both on Facebook. His mother, faced with the ultimate nightmare, didn't call the police immediately. She spoke to him first, trying to understand the depth of the tragedy. But while they talked, the 911 dispatchers in Columbus were about to receive a call that would lead them to a house screwed shut, a body on the floor, and a killer who was currently asking for a very specific ending to his story. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. The 911 call came in around 6 a.m. on August 29, 2023. It wasn't a neighbor reporting a scream. It was Chance Donahoe himself. He was calling from his mother's area in Powell, telling the dispatcher in a flat, monotone voice that he had murdered his girlfriend. But he didn't just want to turn himself in. He told the dispatcher he was coming back to the house on Berkeley Road and that he wanted the police to kill him. He was looking for a suicide by cop finale to his self-penned tragedy. When the Columbus City Police arrived at 1411 Berkeley Road, they found a house that refused to let them in. Officers had to kick the door, meeting the resistance of the screws Chance had driven into the frame. When the door finally gave way, the reality of the 911 call hit them. Shannon Hyatt was exactly where Chance said she would be, lying in the front hall. The scene was gruesome, a word even seasoned detectives would later use. Meanwhile, a massive search was underway for Chance. He hadn't stayed at the house to wait for the police. He was spotted in his vehicle, leading officers on a brief pursuit before he was cornered at a Sheetz gas station. He didn't put up a fight. He put his hands out the window, his fingers mangled and bloodied from the struggle with Shannon. Once he was transported to the Franklin County Jail, the decoder of this story began to emerge. Detectives Phelan and Jude sat across from a man who didn't look like a monster. He looked like a tired 26-year-old with injured hands. They offered him water. They asked about his background. They watched as he transitioned from a polite young man from Colorado to a self-proclaimed deity. Chance began to explain his psychological break. He spoke about his history of methamphetamine use and his undiagnosed schizophrenia. But then the narrative shifted. He began talking about Native American beliefs and the absorbing of the soul. He told the detectives, quite plainly, "I am definitely a god." He explained that while he was in a human vessel and subject to human laws, his spirit was something else entirely. He didn't deny anything. In fact, he seemed proud of the logistics. He explained how he had changed into all black, how he had chosen the knife, and how he had watched Matt leave the house. This was the moment the detectives realized that the insanity defense Chance was hinting at was being undermined by his own words. He had planned the timing. He had waited for Shannon to be alone. He had even thought about the fingerprints. The detectives pushed him on the motive. They brought up the Facebook posts. Chance's demeanor changed when Shannon's social media activity was mentioned. He was obsessed with the fact that she had accused him and his mother of having an inappropriate relationship. He was enraged that she had shared his photo in the "Are we dating the same guy?" group. For Chance, the murder wasn't just about absorbing a spirit. It was about stopping a woman from telling the truth. As the interview wore on, Chance's God persona began to flicker. He spoke about his mother, a woman who had him when she was very young and who he felt a fierce, protective, and perhaps obsessive need to defend. He admitted that Shannon had blocked him and that he felt he would never see her again. The God was actually a man who couldn't handle rejection, a man who viewed a woman's autonomy as a personal attack on his divinity. When the detectives asked him about his tattoos, specifically the Om symbol on his arm, he explained it was the God frequency. He believed he was vibrating on a level the rest of the world couldn't understand. But as he sat in that cold, fluorescent-lit room, the frequency was just the sound of a jail cell door waiting to close. He was impatient. He told the detectives to take me to jail already. While Chance was tucked away in a cell, the legal system was beginning to grind. But a new complication was rising. Chance's family was preparing to fight for his life, while Shannon's family was discovering the full extent of the overkill he had committed. And a discovery in Shannon's personal notes was about to prove that she knew exactly how much danger she was in before the first blow was ever struck. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. As the case moved toward the courtroom in 2024, the narrative Chance Donahoe had tried to build, the story of a god undergoing a psychological break, began to crumble under the weight of forensic evidence and the powerful voices of the Hyatt family. The investigation into Shannon's phone revealed a haunting detail. She had recorded her fears. She had written in her notes about the patterns she saw in Chance, the same patterns of manipulation and theft she had seen in others. She wasn't a passive victim. She was a woman who was actively trying to analyze her own danger. Chance's mother hired a psychologist, hoping to secure an insanity plea. The diagnosis that came back, however, was not one of total detachment from reality. It was a provisional diagnosis of depression and mood instability, heavily influenced by chronic substance abuse. The doctor noted that while Chance had mental health struggles, they did not meet the legal definition of insanity. He knew what he was doing was wrong. He had changed his clothes. He had hidden his car. He had screwed the door shut. These were the actions of a man who understood consequence. In July 2024, realizing that a trial would only further expose the brutal premeditation of the 37 stab wounds, Chance Donahoe pleaded guilty to aggravated murder and abuse of a corpse. The abuse of a corpse charge was a direct result of the hours he spent with Shannon's body, treating her remains not with the spiritual respect he claimed in his interview, but as a trophy of his control. The sentencing hearing on August 9, 2024, was a collision of two vastly different worlds. On one side, Chance's family submitted letters to Judge Laurel Beatty Blunt. They spoke of a troubled childhood, a boy who was in counseling at age 5, and a young man lost to the demon of methamphetamine. They begged for a sentence that included the possibility of parole, clinging to the hope that the boy they knew could be redeemed. On the other side stood the Hyatt family. Shannon's mother, Jamie, delivered a victim impact statement that stripped away all of Chance's God delusions. She spoke of Shannon's brilliance, her career at Nationwide, and her future that was stolen. She looked at the man who claimed to have absorbed her daughter's spirit and told the court that he was nothing more than a coward who attacked a woman half his size. The family didn't want rehabilitation. They wanted the full power of the law. They asked for life without the possibility of parole. Judge Blunt had to weigh these two realities. In the state of Ohio, the law provides specific brackets for aggravated murder. The judge ultimately chose a path that acknowledged the brutality and the premeditation without entirely closing the door on the distant future. Chance Donahoe was sentenced to life in prison. He would not be eligible for a parole hearing for 31 years. For Shannon's family, 31 years felt like an insult. Shannon would never have a chance at a parole from death. She would never reach her 30th birthday, never see the results of her hard work as an investigator, and never again walk through the front door of her home. The 31-year minimum was 11 years longer than the standard minimum, a reflection of the abuse of a corpse and the sheer violence of the 37 wounds, but it offered small comfort. Today, Chance Donahoe resides in the Ohio prison system. He is no longer a god in a vessel. He is an inmate subject to the very human laws he once thought he was above. The God frequency he obsessed over has been replaced by the structured, sterile sounds of a correctional facility. The legacy of Shannon Hyatt, however, lives on in a different way. Her story has become a cautionary pillar in the "Are we dating the same guy?" community. She is remembered not for the way she died, but for her bravery in trying to protect others. She used her voice until the very last moment, proving that even in the face of a man who wanted to steal her life force, her truth was the one thing he could never actually kill. As we close this case, we look back at the Berkeley Roadhouse. It's just a house again, but it stands as a reminder that the digital world and the physical world are inextricably linked. Shannon Hyatt tried to warn us. Chance Donahoe tried to silence her. In the end, the law spoke the loudest. And as always, you've been watching True Crime Story Vault, where every story is told with facts, empathy, and respect for those who can no longer speak for themselves. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button and comment your thoughts below. Until next time, remember, the truth is never buried.